the moat that we used to have built about applying everything to one size fits all technology, that moat's evaporated now. That's our future. That's where we're going. We've got to be more prosthodontic in perspective. I am more excited today to be an orthodontist than I was 20 years ago.
I'm Dr. Scott Law, and I want to thank you for tuning in to the Smile Doctors Off Mute podcast. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Jep Paschal. And Jep, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey, Scott. Appreciate it. It's exciting to be here. I got to admit, I'm a little humbled that you would ask to do this, but hey, let's go.
Well, I know our conversations are ones that are always fascinating, whatever direction they go in. I love speaking with you and hearing about, your thoughts on orthodontics in general, on business, and you just have the mindset for that. So I hope for today to be very awesome and informative for anybody who tunes in.
Hopefully.
Hey, tell me about your start. How'd you arrive to orthodontics?
That's a circuitous answer. So here we go. Got into dental school and just got earmarked for prosthodontics from day one. That was, like many of us, I would go with my hands. I enjoyed figuring puzzles out, and especially three-dimensional stuff. And, pros was just it for me. And so I spent the next 4 years I was just earmarked for it. Got into what was the number one program in the nation at the time and just had a great time. It was an implant center as well at the time. I mean, we're talking 1989 when I graduated. No, college was 89, 93. Graduated dental school. So 93, 97, I was at UT San Antonio.
Wow.
Yeah. And so did pros, loved it. It was great. While I was there, I discovered I was working on a ton of elderly patients. And as many of us know, dental school does not do a great job of training us in medicine. They sort of say, here's a guardrail, don't go beyond that. And then you're like, why? And they're like, we don't know. That's just what we were told. That's more or less our education. I mean, it's probably a little too shallow, but I think some people would identify with that. And so I did a GPR after my pros residency. The one at UT San Antonio was a hospital-based GPR. We did rotations and anesthesia and emergency room, ENT and psychiatric care. And I mean, it was great. It was an amazing experience. So needless to say, got a really good exposure to treating medically compromised patients in our environment. And then after that, went into private practice. Thought that's what I was going to do. And so I did. Came back to Atlanta, Georgia. And in about year 3, I was my wife's a physician assistant. She worked for a craniofacial plastic surgeon. And I was doing a lot of, well, not a lot, but a good, healthy amount of cleft lip, cleft palate patients. Obviously working with an orthodontist. He happened to be in the same building that I was working in. He and I established a relationship, and about 3 or 4 years into my stint as a prosthodontist, we got done treatment planning about 3 or 4 cases one night and sat down and just kind of shooting the bull. And he looked at me dead in the eye and he was like, Jeff, you need to be an orthodontist. And I was kind of taken aback because what he didn't know is my wife and I were already talking about frustrations that I had about private practice or prostho and the nature of that business. And frankly, burning the midnight oil, sure. when your clinic day is over as a prosthodontist, especially as a young prosthodontist, your lab day has just begun. Wow. And so especially back then, no computers, minimal 3D stuff, all that kind of stuff was to come. We were still hands-on stone models, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
And so I started pursuing it. My wife was receptive and we were fortunate enough to get into ortho school, and fast forward 23 years later, and here we sit, So, but that's the short answer to a very long, path. So,
no. So how has your pros background affected how do you treat ortho?
Some people would say that my pros background would kind of engineer me towards this like exacting static, relationship, right? Because that's how we're training pros. As a patient comes in, this is where they're at today. all the recordings, I mean, my gosh, we spent an entire semester on mounting models, right? To like getting the right, condylar position, right? Which is fraught with so many errors. It's not even funny.
Sure.
So, you would think that I would have that perspective. I actually have the exact opposite perspective because, prosthodontists tend to look at things static. Now, I'm not, not isolation in time. They know things are going to change, but it's changing like a glacier, not rapidly. Orthodontists tend to think, we look at occlusion very dynamic. I'll give you a great case in point, mounting models at the beginning of a case. My mindset, I've done it both ways. And my mindset is the first time we throw in a tray or a wire, their mandibles actually usually go into a more relaxed position. They go into that, retreated condylar position and, everybody's happy. Mm-hmm. That's why when they come in, that's why when you have a class 1 patient comes in and they come in after their first appointment and all of a sudden they're partial class 2 and you're like, did I miss a diagnosis? That's why that happens. Right.
Yeah.
So my viewpoint from a pros perspective and from an ortho perspective now is occlusion is radically dynamic. And, that's the cool thing about ortho is we get to affect those positions of teeth in some actually pretty compromised scenarios. If we're working with an orthodontist or with a general practitioner, heavy restorative dentistry or a prosthodontist. So yeah, Prosto, it really broadened my perspective on what occlusion is as a patient, and then also the margin of error on that. A lot of prosthodontists have a very narrow margin of error on what occlusion should be. Mine has become a little broader over time, and just because of that pros background with the ortho. So hopefully, I'm not boring anybody with those answers, but that's getting into a little bit of the geekdom.
I think it's amazing. I think there's so much that. Yeah, I think orthodontists, we either follow, all the guys back in the day, Ron Roth, or you were pigeonholing, you were going to treat in this certain philosophy and get it done. And it's very different than what the patients want or need these days. I think ABO standards are beautiful. When cases finish that way, I think they're just amazing. But I also understand, hey, there's a person on the other end of those teeth that, yeah, what do those finishes look like? What's best going to serve them at this time of their life? What's your philosophy on some of these things that have come out of the kind of the aesthetic and cosmetic correction versus a full occlusion correction? How do you approach things?
Yeah. Frankly, the first way I approach is I approach it actually in the consult room with the patient.
Yes.
I mean, it is part of just that conversation that has to happen. One of the things I think that our programs did us to a certain degree a disservice on years ago was, they would silo us into those treatments. It's like, oh, I'm a Ron Roth guy, or I'm a Damon guy, or, I years ago, God, I'm showing my age. I treat Beg, whatever it is.
Really?
Or I'm Invisalign only, right? I mean, we can still silo ourselves even today. I try to have those discussions with patients. And, one of the things in, taking another learning point from pros, a prosthodontist, especially a prosthodontics is a specialty of all these different treatments that we can do and all these different technologies that we can do that we bring to bear within the scope of, frankly, general dentistry, restorative dentistry. Okay. It's just kind of like quote unquote super restorative dentist because you become an expert in all of these different treatment modalities that are available. And so when I treatment plan a patient on the pros side, it's you treatment plan. Hey, you've got the Cadillac treatment plan. You've got I'm really going to show my age now. You got the Chevrolet treatment plan. And you got the Yugo treatment plan. Some of you younger people probably don't even know what a Yugo is. Sat and I do. But, I guess in today's world, you got the Ferrari plan.
Go-kart.
You've got essentially it was a go-kart. So, in the pros terms, that's going to be, you've got implant supported, you've got fixed or crown and bridge, and then you've got removable, and so every single patient that you would work up on the pros side, that's how we'd work it up, right? You'd have A, B, and C, expensive, moderate, cheap, or inexpensive. Okay. At least by dental standard. The ortho side, when I came over to ortho, I was trained in the silo, fit every patient into this philosophy, ABO standards, class 1 occlusion, yada, yada, yada. But on my side now, 20 years later, I've really adapted more of that prosthodontic perspective. We've got this myriad of technologies available to us to treat our patients now. And I am more excited today to be an orthodontist than I was 20 years ago, because now I've got this palette of colors. I like to think of it that way. And every day it seems like we're adding another variation of color that we can paint with. So, from my perspective, that conversation starts in the consult room. It's like, okay, what are your priorities? What do you want to do? And frankly, most of the time they don't know. So one of my treatment philosophies is being able to shift gears and change as the patient brings new data, because it's a long relationship. It's not, we're with these patients a year, 2 years at a time. And the conversation a year ago is going to be different than a conversation towards the end of treatment. Because as you know, we get some of those patients all the time that they keep on moving the goalpost, right? Yeah. The hedonic treadmill of orthodontics, like it just keeps moving and moving and moving. And so it's important to be in conversation with your patient to keep that original goalpost in mind. It's okay to change, but changing has consequences to treatment time and frankly, sometimes payment. And, because it wasn't the fee that we originally agreed on. And those are the difficult conversations I think we need to get better at as orthodontists, because our payment model is one big umbrella, one-stop shop. This is the fee for 18 months treatment, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it changes, right? Whereas the prosto side, it was always fee for service. Oh, you don't want that bridge? You want to do an implant? Okay, the implant code is X, therefore the fee is Y. Yep. We don't have those, or we haven't had those luxuries in orthodontics. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting off on a little tangent there. Maybe
I love it.
Redirect me.
No. I love it. That's a background. That's exactly what I was fascinated to hear your take on. So you did your training, your ortho training in New York. Is that right? You did it at
Eastman Dental Center.
Okay.
Yep. And University of Rochester.
You crossed paths with some characters there that have impacted your life and
that character would be John Graham. We had a really cool. We were a class of 6, and we had just an amazing group of people that came in. Dan Subtelny was our director, has since passed. And he amassed this particular year of the 6 people, all 6 of us had experience in some other portion of life. 5 of us had experience in either general dentistry directly, or they had experience in another residency program. We had a periodontist, we had a prosthodontist, we had an oral surgeon that was referenced to John Graham. We had a gentleman that had been in private practice. And then we had another gentleman that was in the Air Force. And I don't know, anybody who's trained in the Air Force, they know that essentially you do all these mini residencies in the Air Force. That's kind of the way they train you. So, he had a ton of experience. And then the only person that came in directly out of dental school, he was a radiology tech before he even went to dental school. So we all came with just this huge background of experience. And you want to talk about some really neat, just group conversation, teaching moments, just constant exchange of just ideas and perspectives. It was a special time. It really was.
It's amazing. And I've heard you guys had a lot of fun and you're friends to this day. And that's just amazing.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yep.
How cool.
And so many programs. I have, that's one of the neat things about ortho. It seems like there's so many people are close to their classmates in some way, shape or form. And it's been cool.
That's great. And was Stuart Frost there when you were there as well?
He was not. He was there a couple of years before me. Okay. And Stu, I believe, did the TMJ program as well, and then did the ortho program if memory serves. But yeah, his name was already in the ethos of infamy at Eastman Dental Center when I was there. So, and then I subsequently had the opportunity to meet and, interact with Stu on several different stages and modalities through the years.
100%. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. So right when you came out of school, given your pros background, you treated kind of what did you gravitate towards? And then I know that you've spoken for several companies and have seen the technology change. I'd love to take this conversation that way. What you've seen change over time. Yeah.
I sometimes got to get diarrhea of the mouth on this subject matter, so cut me off if we need to redirect. Yeah. So when I entered, or I came out, the gentleman that I was having the treatment planning those cases with as a prosthodontist, he has always been kind of a mentor, especially early in my career. And he was practicing active self-ligation at the time with the Innovation bracket and really channeled me into that. We had a little bit of passive self-ligation with the Damon bracket in our program at Eastman, but not a real heavy emphasis on it. So I had a little bit of a smattering of education on that. But, following him as a mentor, I basically started using Innovation R and went from there. And, it really enjoyed that bracket. Some of the technological limitations of that bracket early on was AP correction was a little bit more difficult. We had to be a little bit more intentional. And I can remember being at a meeting at like year 3 of my private practice with my residency mates. And one of them was the son of an orthodontist, and he was a Damon practice. So he went right into a full-on 100% Damon practice. And we were kind of comparing cases, as ortho geeks do at meetings. And I was looking at his cases. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting these types of results, especially on my AP corrections. My finishing, leveling, hunting was fine, but my AP corrections just weren't there. And so I was like, immediately, I was like, I got to do that. I want to experiment with that and see what's going on. So I embraced Damon, and then had the fortune, coincidentally, to get in with Ormco Insiders at that time, do some other relationships and mentorships that I had developed totally by happenstance. And so went full on Damon. And then subsequently got exposed to Insignia, which was an early indirect bonding system. And at the time, that was a twin system. So a little contradiction with the Damon system, but the advantages or the perceived advantages of indirect bonding, especially in the early 2000s, were, shall we say, very enticing for essentially what was a 95%, 99%, bonded appliance practice at that time. So we were looking for any excuse. I mean, you remember the days to decrease. I mean, gosh, if we could shave off 2 appointments, what a glorious thing that would be, right?
Sure.
So got involved in that. And that was really my first introduction to what true technology was. Like Craig Andrejko, who developed that, had the opportunity with Craig and both Jeff Kozlowski. Jeff was consistently flying out to California, and I would go meet them intermittently here and there as my private practice would permit. And what a unbelievable exposure, to bracket manufacturing and concepts and understanding how things are created, and, what true relevance of controls on, stock management and the big industrial optics and perspectives that we as cottage industry orthodontists just frankly, why would we learn that kind of stuff, but it really affected my practice. Like the first thing I did is I came in and I instituted their stock management program, obviously on a microcosm, but I instituted that in my practice, like as soon as I saw it. There's this simple card system with a par score and we, to this day, we still have cards in our stock management system. That's like when the system pulls it, if they pull the card, they put it in a box and that's to be ordered. Kind of simple. But the technology side, we kept going on it. And honestly, the exposure to Craig Andrejko, now that I think about it, it was just what an incredible opportunity. And then to be on Ormco Insiders, be interacting with this, probably the smartest collection of orthodontists that I had been around until I joined Smile Doctors.
Oh, wow.
They unbelievable personalities, incredibly receptive, very kind, authentic. Obviously I don't have a fear of speaking. And so, in a group dynamic like that, when you got 50 people in the room or 40 people in the room, you're going to say something stupid, right? Very forgiving, very understanding, and so it gives you the freedom to explore ideas and go down rabbit holes with a group. And it was just an awesome opportunity to learn. And every one of those meetings, we'd come back and we were always applying a new technology, and sometimes it wasn't even technology. It was a new protocol, a new workflow, right? In the practice, or a new way to manage, or a new marketing gimmick, or, whatever it was. We were always bringing something new to the practice.
I love it.
Yeah. And then, yeah, so that is kind of the background on my technology side. And then I honestly, through the years, I've just kept on applying technologies. I think I've counted up recently, and I want to say, from a systems perspective, between brackets and clear aligners, I think I'm on my 10th or 11th system.
Wow.
In the practice. And like right now in my practice, if you were to really drill me down on how many systems we utilize on a daily basis, it's obviously 2 primary, fixed and removable.
Mm-hmm.
But then I do in-house aligners, and we do Invisalign. And I want to say right now, my 85% of my starts are Invisalign.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean we don't use fixed.
Sure.
And, and that's, to me, that's our future. That's where we're going, is where we've got to be more prosthodontic in perspective of bringing all these technologies together, using all these colors to paint with. And I think that's our future as a specialty, because
Sure.
the moat that we used to have built about applying everything to one size fits all technology, that moat's evaporated now.
Sure.
Through the advent of clear aligners and essentially one lab fee for a case, and then you get a fully distributable system that you can move teeth with. And there's multiple companies now that will do that for you.
Yep.
The moat's gone,
Yep.
So,
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
So changing through all those different systems, you said something really, really fascinating to me, is the perceived value, or the perception that IDB was going to be flawless and perfect. And each of these has their trade-offs. So each one works a little bit different in one way, a little bit worse in another way. And so you've gone through all these changes. The fascinating part to me, whenever you and I speak, is your perspective of just the psychology of change, as well as the macro. When you and I talk, and you understand at a high level what I have painfully had to discover of just business on a macro level, and then also how does that translate down to the local level with each doctor. Talk to me about the change cycle. How have you gotten your team on board when you come in with a new idea, new technology, some way that you can better serve the patients? It's going to also benefit the business. How have you gotten your team on board and led them to accept and be cool with it?
Yeah, honestly, that's the question. And sometimes I wish I could tell you the absolute answer to that, but we've evolved into it over a number of years. But I think a couple key points is it starts at the interview. It starts at the interview of the employee. And I look them dead in the eye and I tell them, I don't even ask them the question anymore. I basically tell them, if your personality is something that appreciates change, that isn't afraid of walking in Monday morning and doing something differently than you did before, then you will thrive with us. But if your personality and your heart of hearts, when you leave this interview, if you're thinking about this and you're one of those personalities that you like to do the same thing every day, and it's predictable and there's comfort wrapped around that, and you identify with your personality that way, then we're not going to be the practice for you. We're not going to be somebody that you're going to enjoy being here 6 months from now, because eventually all the personalities get old, and then you're going to be bogged down of, I don't want to apply. I just want to do it the way we did it last week. I was comfortable with it. It was great, but if you enjoy experimenting, so it starts there and just in the interview. And then obviously there's some feedback based on that, and there's a conversation wrapped around that. So that's step one. Step two, which, as a solo practitioner, admittedly was a little bit easier. I would have exit conversations with people, look, it's not working out. We're not, this is where you're constrained. And we've tried to move you around on the bus in a couple of different spots and it's not working. And we have to find a way to separate ways, that kind of a conversation so that you can get somebody on board that's used to change. That's step one. Step two is just to constantly cultivating that and be in that more of an education mode within your practice and get that buy-in. Don't just come in Monday morning and say, this is the way we're doing it. I don't want to hear anything. It's like incorporate the team in that, have the conversation with them at your team meetings. Like we have a team meeting. We have our normal daily meetings, our quote unquote huddles, but we also have team meetings every week. We try to, where it's either training or discussion wrapped around some problem or a new thing that we're going to be doing. And I always tell them the why. If they don't understand the why and you don't have a buy-in on why, they will never translate to that to the patient, and they will always be resistant. And I'll give you a great example that's actually salient to today, right now, in my practice and in many practices. Dental monitoring. We implemented dental monitoring 3 or 4 years ago, like right when it came out. I was like, oh my God, I was like, candy to a baby, tech guy, we're doing this, right? I didn't get buy-in from my staff. They didn't understand the value. The patients subsequently didn't understand the value. And one of the most difficult things about instituting dental monitoring is getting buy-in from the patient too. So if you don't have buy-in from your staff, you're not going to get buy-in from the patients. And unless the patient intuitively got it, which that doesn't happen all the time. And so it was a failure. And so within 4 or 5 months, I was like, nope, we're done. We're not ready for this. This technology needs to mature a little bit more. And frankly, we need to mature and understand how, what that why is for us in the practice. But then fast forward to today, dental monitoring has a different meaning in our practice. My staff buys into it, not to the point that they get irritated when a patient's not using it. And that shows through, not the irritation level, but it shows through in their dialogue. It shows through in the way they represent it. And so, and that's the give and take with these technologies is if they don't reflect the why that you've got, that you understand that's attracting you for the implementation of that technology, then you're not going to be able to implement it successfully. And then the third component is, and I learned this the hard way, as many of us have, because my closet is full of past technology. I was one of the guys that signed on for the original Lithos scanner from Ormco.
Okay. Yes.
And paid the price for it. Right. Yes. Great experimentation. I've got 1 or 2 staff members that are still with me from those days. And, we actually laugh about it occasionally. It's my singular most expensive doorstop in the office. I mean, well-designed product, ahead of its time. I think we all saw the value. The why wasn't the problem. It was the technology that was the problem. We just, it was a combination of the company and the profession. We just weren't ready for it. And so now when I look at technologies with that and some other learning experiences in my back pocket, if you can't look at a technology and really answer a problem that you're solving either for your patient or for your practice, your staff, or heck, it can even be lifestyle, right? Or for the greater good of the corporation that you're in, like in my case, Smile Doctors, in our case, Smile Doctors. If you can't understand what the greater good of that is, and if there isn't any, then the answer is no. Like either the technology is not ready or you're not ready, or it has minimal applicability. And then the fourth thing is it's got to be commercially viable.
Yep.
You have to have an ROI on these technologies, and sometimes it's not a direct ROI, which is a little squirrely, being with Smile Doctors now. I mean, it's funny having conversations with MDAs is a total different conversation than, with your spouse or your staff, and you're willingly justifying, and coincidentally, you're writing the check, right? It's it's kind of a different flavor, but it's been really healthy, because if the technology doesn't have a return, then you don't need it either. So you've got to be considerate of kind of those 4 dynamics. And I'm sure there's subcategories in there, but those are the big 4.
I love it. That's exactly the experience that I've had, where you're talking about, you have to have the team buy-in. I have seen so many different, just go to a simple thing like, let's say you're doing some in-office contest. And I have made this mistake where I thought I came up with a great idea for an in-office contest. And it was my idea. And I said, we're going to do this. And the team was like, okay. And guess what? That failed miserably. They didn't really care. They didn't promote it with the patients, and nothing really came of it. We didn't get the marketing bump that I was hoping, or even the fun and smiles. Nothing. And then on the other side, I've seen where I said, hey, we need some sort of contest, don't you think? And I think it would kind of liven some things up. You guys should consider that. Float it out there. Next thing you know, they put their heads together. They come up with something, of a scavenger hunt through the office, or guess somebody's baby pick. I don't know. There's been so many that have been done, but when the team gets behind it, all of a sudden they are pumped to take that patient over, have them enter the drawing, or do whatever they're going to do because it was their idea. And I see it succeed.
Yeah.
And I see the patients probably think like, why am I doing this? But they see everybody so excited about it that they go along with it. They get their picture taken. It's on social media and promoted. Somebody wins something. It's great. But it goes to the same,
Scott, you're touching on something that is incredibly important to just running a practice. I mean, the tech discussion and all that is us being in a cottage industry for the, most of us or just have that background. We went the science track. We didn't really have the business influence. Is that ability that I think you have intuitively, like watching you over the years, and that's the ability to let people do what they're good at, is to develop a team and let them go and not micromanage. I mean, early in my career, I was a phenomenal micromanager. I mean, my ability to control and to just choke the living, out of my own staff. I was really good at it. And one of the people at Insiders actually in Ormco pulled me aside one day. We were having a discussion about something and this came up. He's like, dude, you gotta let go. You have to empower your team to fail. You have to give them permission that it's okay to fail. And I took that to heart.
Yeah.
I really did. And, I hope, if my staff perchance is listening to this, and I hope they're not laughing at it and saying, yeah, you're anything but that. But I really do hope that my staff, that was the linchpin for me. That was the cornerstone of change for me for implementing so many things, is just giving my staff permission to fail and giving, now granted, you got set limits. Okay. That's part of being a proper business owner and a manager and all of those things, leader, frankly, because if they fail too much, then they're going to hurt themselves, right? You can't just let everything willy-nilly go. But that's the biggest thing. And that's something that I've always admired about you is your ability to surround yourself with people that you knew more than you in certain areas, and you listen. And then you also had team members that you surround yourself with, that you gave them that ability to fail. And I think that's one of the reasons why Smile Doctors has been so successful. So, but, kudos to you for doing that. I sure as heck didn't learn it early enough.
I appreciate it. I have to admit, I was way better than you at micromanaging people. I was the best. I killed so many things because I had to have them perfect. And to this day, I still admit that I'm a recovering perfectionist. And, it almost, to the point where it almost cost me my marriage, say like that level of just the pressure and making sure everything had to be perfect. But in my mind, perfect, whatever that definition was. And oh my goodness. And it was just through a lot of pain, a lot of suffering on my part to arrive to that point, to be like, you know what, I've got to let go. I've got to get out of the way. I've got to allow other people to use their strengths, their greatest strength, and let them grow. They're better than me. And that's great. That is the best thing. When we get a collection of the best people who are better than me at other things, we have such a stronger team. And I see that as Smile Doctors. That's where I was able to, if you kind of look at Smile Doctors and you see how we change over time, we came in early on. We thought that we had it figured out so much that we rebranded everyone to name themselves Smile Doctors and to wear the red t-shirts and to do all the stuff. And we thought we had the silver bullet of orthodontics. Quickly got kicked in the stomach, learned that that was not accurate. That wasn't working. And then realized, oh man. And that was kind of the interpersonal transformation that I had at the same time as the business, that it was like, no, you know what? There are people who are so much better than me. And I celebrate that. That is the best thing. I want their influence on my life. I want their influence on all of these practices. And how can we get the greatest collection of the greatest orthodontists we can do? And that's what Smile Doctors is. That's just the sharing of ideas. And then just like you're talking right now, I took away pieces on how can I be a better leader? How can I lay it out more clearly? I love your suggestion of when we're hiring someone, let's ask them that question. Hey, how are you with change? This is an environment where we're in constant change for the benefit of the patient, the practice, and everyone else. I think that's it. And that gets a mindset for the rest of our life where we can change. We can see areas that, where can I improve today? Because I think too often,
and it keeps it fun and fresh too.
I agree.
I mean,
I totally agree.
I couldn't imagine practicing the same way for 30 years. And frankly, that's the way it was before, frankly, our generation, right?
Yeah.
I can remember when I was doing my original practice evaluation, and the most expensive thing was the Panorex. It was $20,000.
Yeah.
And which to me, it's a sheer penance by today's expenses.
Serious.
And then the salesperson would look at you and say, but this is the only one you're ever going to have to buy.
Wow.
This is it for your whole practice.
Wow.
Those days are gone.
Yeah. They're just,
those days are gone.
Yeah. I mean, all that equipment, I think it's the pendulum swung so far the other way to where there's so much change, and you got to change every year, and you got to revamp everything and buy all these new printers and buy all this brand new technology, all this stuff. And just like you said, so wise, who does this serve, and what question does this answer? Is this truly something that needs to be changed right now or not? Is it working?
Yep.
I see an erosion of, so there's the orthodontic fee, which has remained relatively stable throughout, for the last 25 or 30 years. It hasn't gone up a whole lot. And yet I see all this technology that's come in that's supposedly solving a problem, and it just
chipping away at that overhead.
Exactly. It erodes the middle, and we're not able to provide for our team members and salaries and giving back to the patient in so many other ways. And so I just think, what's the trade-off to this? It's funny to see these practices. Some practices we come across are straight bracket and wire rubber bands. And I see how they run, and they are extremely profitable because they know who they are, know what their patients want. And then I see others that are super high aligner share chair. And, like you said, like 80, 90%, they know who they are, and they've retooled to use the technology to have the offset on the labor. They don't need as large a team to service that number of patients. So it's a matter of how do you look at it? What question does this solve? Is it going to be better ultimately? Really, is the technology really better? And then go from there. So yeah.
And some of it's just engineering to get the technology to be better, quote unquote, in your hand.
Yeah.
I love how we always talk about the science in something, and we forget that science was invented to explain observation, right? And like these techniques, science wasn't invented to just invent something and prove that it's true, right? It was invented to look at something and see why is this happening, and then answer the why, right? And then specifically. And so we forget the art side of this. We forget that philosophical, artistic, side of the discussion so many times.
True.
And it's a blending of the two.
True.
And so when you're bringing on these technologies, that's another component of this, is that you not only do you have to be open to change, you got to be open internally to changing yourself, because you have to, like, clear aligner is a great example. You gotta learn how to look at things on a computer. You gotta learn how to set teeth on a computer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't train on that when, I was stoked. We were all physical, right? Yes. And then you got to learn, teeth don't know what's moving it. Okay, that's fine. But plastics move teeth slightly different than metallics do. Sure. Right. And bonding appliances. Then you have to learn that, right? It's like every time I change a bracket system, I always had in my head, I knew there's a 2-year timeline. Yeah. Why? Because the average cycle for a patient was somewhere around 18 to 20 months. And it took that many failures to really learn the limitations of the system.
I agree.
And so you had to quote unquote log your 10,000 hours, end quote, right? The old Malcolm Gladwell bullet point. Since been proven and true, but I think in principle, it's a good expression of expressing it takes time to learn stuff.
Absolutely agree.
So that's a component of that ROI that you're talking about, is that dedication to learning the limitations of the technology that you're doing, and also the willingness to either fully embrace it or be honest with yourself and dismiss it.
That's right. And that's the hard
either
part.
Or.
That's the hard part, is truly being honest.
It is the hard part.
Because I see so many technologies,
cost bias.
So many technologies out there. Like I was just at the AO and walking the floor and seeing all these technologies, and you know what? They all work. And what the ones that work are, how determined is that orthodontist going to be to make that technology work? And it does. If somebody's that dogged about it, they get the teeth straight. Now, how efficient is it? Yep. At what cost to the patient? In number of visits and pain and discomfort and period of time. But they'll all get the teeth straight. Like you said, a force applied will move teeth.
Yep.
So you've gone through. You've seen a lot of change. You've actuated a lot of change. What do you see for the future of orthodontics? I mean, what do you see for the industry, for you, for your practice as a solo practitioner, in your office? What do you see?
Hey, a lot of this discussion depends on the timeline, and obviously the further we go out, the more inaccurate the conclusions are going to be. So let's just frame it that way. But my optics today, first of all, brackets aren't dead.
Yep.
You can be incredibly proficient with brackets. And I actually have a cohort of patients that demand bracket, within my practice. So, I may want to be bracket free, which frankly, in my heart of hearts as an orthodontist, I would like to be bracket free. And it's one of the reasons why I'm pursuing technologies as such. And that bracket free is in quotes. It's kind of, I think we'll always have bonded appliances. I just want to explore other adaptations of bonded appliances.
Cool.
So we have to be specific about that. But in the short run, brackets aren't going anywhere other than decreasing the percentage in most orthodontic practices. I mean, if you look at the orthodontic manufacturing data for the last decade, it's just been this steady percentage downward slope of, or actually, I guess as far as the camera is concerned, it's this way, this downward slope of bracket usage within our practices. So obviously clear aligners are coming on. You walk around the AO floor and it's clear aligners everywhere. You got two principal technologies in today's world, and that's clear aligners and custom manufactured appliances. Those are kind of the two big categories. The hallmark here to the discerning observationalist is they're custom. That's the hallmark. Okay. Unfortunately, custom brings added expenses. And the cool thing is computer technology over time is going to scale those expenses down, but it's always going to be there. So as in the not so distant future, I see us going again to apply that prosthodontic perspective. I see us transitioning our profession in a couple of ways. The first, most obvious way is we are going to have to be an expert in multiple modalities, not only within our practice, but on the specific patient. We have to get better about treatment planning our patients within your acumen as an orthodontist to bring several technologies to bear in an efficient manner to treat that patient.
Yes.
Okay. That's going to vary from me to you and to others. Okay. And at Smile Doctors, that's going to be one of our problems. One of the things you alluded to it before is you tried to do the mindset of it's this way or the highway, right? It's like everybody gets into this best practice.
Yep.
In quotes. People feel too constrained. They don't feel creative enough. And then before long, you've got people that are just punching a clock.
Yep.
Unmotivated to do anything.
I want that.
Bunch of automatons. I mean, sure, there's exceptions, right? Yeah. But so you have to be careful from a corporate perspective. But we have to understand these technologies and how to incorporate them, and then also allow people to be creative within that environment. Mm-hmm. And as a solo practitioner, the component as a solo practitioner is to challenge yourself in that changing environment. What are you good at? What do you want to be an expert at, right? And bringing those technologies together. The other component to this is that a lot of people are interpreting as a threat. I guess in the strictest of terms, it is a threat. And I've alluded to this before, the moat wrapped around the distribution of orthodontics as a technology, because like it or not, we are a specialty that is defined by a technique. We are not defined by a demographic.
Ah, yes.
And, pediatric dentistry would be a great example. Pediatric dentistry is defined by a demographic. Okay. There's a huge number of dentists that do not want to work on young kids. They don't have the temperament for it. They don't have the personality.
Yep.
And then there's a subset of general dentists or dentists that want to. So their fiefdom, their moat, if you will, their fiefdom is protected simply by their desire to who they work on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yep. They bring the exact same technologies that all of us bring to bear on the patients, but their specialty is defined by the demographic. So we don't have that luxury. And frankly, neither does a prosthodontist. Mm-hmm. Neither does an endodontist. Mm-hmm. And, at the end of the day, neither does an oral surgeon. Okay. There's a knowledge base that defines this specialty. There's techniques that define the specialty and the application of those techniques. So we have to embrace these technologies moving forward. But at the same time, we have to understand that we're going to be able to scale out these technologies. I'm going to be able to service 20 years from now. I will not be in practice 20 years from now, but 20 years from now, the orthodontist sitting here looking into this camera or whatever recording device is being utilized at that time, they're going to scale out to, let's see, I don't know how many patients are currently in treatment in my practice, but let's say it's 1,500 patients, right? It's going to scale out to 15,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Through the augmentation of artificial intelligence and technologies and distribution of technologies, orthodontists, there's going to be less of us, or the population is going to grow to an extent that the number will remain the same. Either way, it's the same argument. Right. There'll be proportionally less orthodontists.
Right.
And it's going to scale out. And we're going to have technicians or general dentist or whoever buys the service that's going to be doing specialty care. And then since that moat is a lot smaller, the general dentist is going to be trained to do class 1 carotids all day long.
Right.
And so our case complication is going to go way up. And I've already seen it in my practice. I do a cartwheel when a class 1 carotid comes in the office, right? But today versus even 3 years ago, my case complication has gone through the roof. So I've had to train myself to be much more adaptive in the consult room, because the consult is still the consult.
Right.
I don't want to increase the number of recalls to do, like I need more time to diagnose this case. I need more time to figure it out. I use technology for that.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, and you have to adapt to the way you do things. Again, scaling myself to more complicated cases. So what I mean by that is that scope of care that we're utilizing, we have to broaden that scope of care. And we have to bring these technologies to satisfy that scope of care, because we can't be that myopic anymore, both in the technology that we use and then the patient that we want to treat. We don't have that luxury anymore because that moat's gone.
Yep. Agree.
So, we have to broaden it. And so that's where the technology piece is really going to make us excel, So I hope that's not too circuitous of an answer. I hope that, and then long term out, that's where I see us as a specialty. The specialty will survive.
Yeah.
It's just, fortunately, there's going to be less of us.
I think so. And I mean, years from now, right? I think that's where.
Definitely.
But yeah, it will be. It'll be our knowledge. It'll be our use of technology. And I'm right there with you. I think scaling it from 1,500 to 15,000 patients, overseeing the treatment that way, perhaps not exactly delivering the treatment in every way, but we'll be overseeing. And on some of those simple class 1s, simple class 2s, whatever it is, I think the dentist feels the same pressure. People have fewer and fewer cavities. I think, they're moving to see other ways that they can serve their patients. And so some of the low hanging fruit in whatever specialty, simple endos, simple ortho, whether they bring in hygienists for perio, simple perio to maintain, it's really interesting to see how the entire profession is shifting around. Jeff, and fascinating. I appreciate all of this. I love your perspective. I'm so glad we got to hear all about how you've come. It was a lesson to me to hear your insights, where you gained your education and experience. And now I understand why our talks are so fascinating, just because of the breadth of knowledge that you have on so many things in our field and scaling things and then implementing change. I appreciate this conversation. This was very impactful to me, and I thank you for taking the time today.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I thank you. It's this is part of the interaction, right? It's part of the ongoing conversation, and one of the reasons why I love being a part of Smile Doctors as a team. Gosh, we just had our meeting and I learned so much, and it just about the perspective and the optics of the future and where we're going just as a group of individuals, and not only for us personally, but then also as a profession. So thanks for the opportunity to join this amazing adventure.
Yep. Well, thanks for being an awesome partner. Appreciate you. All right. Love you, brother.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Love you too, man. Thanks. Bye.